Welcome to another episode of Crunch Time here on ASCB Productions. I'm your host, Joe Hamilton, along with Scott Tobin. Scott, how are you, man?
I'm all right, Joe. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. Scott, I know there was more rain expected out your way. Did you get a lot of rain today?
It rained on and off today, and then we had a little thunderstorm a little while ago.
So yeah, I knew it wasn't supposed to be for everybody, but I knew that at least a portion of the viewing area of any news station in town was going to get hit, and I think it was more north. So good thing it wasn't bad. There was a slight chance for a severe storm here or there, but good thing nobody was hurt. That's for sure. There was a tornado warning, actually, Scott. I don't know if you knew about that. So good thing everybody's okay. But you know who's not okay? Who's not okay? The St. Louis Blues. They are struggling right now. They took on the Vegas Golden Knights last night, and to be honest with you, Scott, even though it was 1-1 through two periods of that game, the Blues looked like they had no business being in the same arena as the Vegas Golden Knights. They had 4 unanswered goals scored against them in period 3. And not only that, you had a disgruntled Jordan Binnington taking a swing at one of the Vegas players after a goal. So, Scott, what the hell's going on with this team right now? I mean, look, you say don't panic, don't overdo it, but at the same time, Scott, you're basically measuring yourself up against teams like this, like Vegas, and you're going to have, in the month of April, -1 game, you're going to be facing Vegas, Colorado, Minnesota all month. So does this worry you?
I'm going to go back. I don't know if you saw the shows that Wags and I did over the weekend, but we kind of talked about this. The fact that they're struggling on the ice, I've said don't worry a whole lot. They're beat up. They're going to get better. What worries me is the stuff that I'm hearing behind the scenes. Hearing Craig Berube call guys out, talk about how they're not all going in the same direction, that they're soft, that they're not doing this, they're not doing that. It's the same stuff we heard 2 years ago, that team, before they went on their cup run. Before, we had a coach get fired and Craig Berube came in, and it's a repeated pattern with this team. They play bad, they get a coach fired. They get a new coach in, they play okay for a while, then they start doing the same crap over again until that coach gets fired. And then a new coach comes in and gets them. So I'm not saying Craig Berube is going to get fired right away, but I'm seeing the same pattern that we've seen for the last 10 years with this team.
Yeah, it's you think a new culture would be in once you get a new coach, but Scott, there hasn't been a new culture in 3 years, and it's the same pattern. What fixes it at this point? Is there anything that you can say what fixes it?
I'm not sure, Joe. That's what I'm saying. Like I said to Wags the other day, you have to start wondering if there's a fundamental problem in this organization, that why this keeps happening, because it does keep happening. It keeps happening every couple of years. Because like I said, they play well for a coach for a little while, and then it's like the guys decide they don't have to listen. They're going to do whatever they want, and then coach gets fired, and then a new guy comes in and they play okay for a little while. And there's the one thing you can look at, for a long time, it was the same group of guys. It was the Backuses and the Petrangelos and the Steens and those guys. Most of those guys aren't there anymore. It's a new group of guys, but that culture seems to have carried over to these younger guys, where they don't have to play hard all the time. They don't have to pull in the same direction all the time. It's kind of like they're playing for themselves. And we've heard Craig Berube actually come out and say that a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. And so, I think sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to stop you there, but I think you have to start looking at Doug Armstrong and the way he's putting these teams together, and start asking questions about how this organization runs from the top down.
Well, and before you cut me off, which it was a good reason you did, but I do got to ask you, Scott, at one point do you think maybe it's the captaincy? That maybe Ryan O'Reilly isn't saying the right things. Maybe, maybe these alternate captains aren't the right men for the job. Is there any way you can say that in any way, shape, or form right now?
Well, except that, everybody said for 3 years that Ryan O'Reilly was the leader of this team, even though he wasn't the captain. That he was kind of the unofficial captain, even when Petro was still here. So, I mean, I don't think you can throw it all on Ryan O'Reilly's shoulders. And we've had these same guys. I mean, Vladdy's been an assistant captain for a long time, and so is it's the same guys that have been doing it for a couple of years. So I don't think you can look at it that. I think, like I said again, I think it's just something organizationally that for whatever reason, it's kind of like these guys stop listening to the coach. It's kind of like the message gets lost after a certain amount of time, and it just keeps happening over and over again. And, Wags and I talked about the fact that a lot of these players don't seem to fit Craig Berube's system. So maybe there's a disconnect between Army and Berube, because Army keeps signing guys that don't seem to fit how Berube wants to play. So maybe there's even a disconnect there between the general manager and the coach.
Now, if you were to speculate, Scott, who are these players? Who are these players that do not fit Berube's system?
I mean, there's certain people that we've heard him call out a lot of times. I mean, Jordan Kyrou, we all know he called out a ton last year. Kyrou's played better, although he disappeared for quite a while in the middle of this season after his hot start. I mean, I think there's different people. I don't want to speculate, but, some of the same guys that, we've heard their names mentioned throughout the season. Like I said, I don't want to throw people under the bus, but we've heard guys' names like Vince Dunn, and we've heard Zach Sanford's name, and we've heard, like I said, you've heard a bunch of different guys. So I think it's just a combination of everything. And the fact that you have so many people hurt has definitely hurt this team too. You've got guys playing in different lines and different combinations and all of that stuff that doesn't help anything. But it just seems like everything with this team is just really a mess right now.
It really is. And, now we're getting our first look at the Minnesota Wild on Thursday night. And that Minnesota Wild team is no joke, Scott. So this team needs to be playing better. Did you, when you watched that game last night, Scott, did you get the same feeling I did, like they didn't belong there?
To be completely honest, I didn't start watching the game until the third period.
Yeah, but you saw the gist of it then.
Yeah, no, I did. I saw the third period. And the third period, they just looked – they weren't really there. I mean, they weren't really skating. They weren't really doing anything. They got outshot 16-2 in that third period. Bennington let in a couple of pretty soft goals. A couple of them were not his fault, but a couple of them were soft goals. And you've got to start pointing a finger at Jordan Bennington too, because since he signed his contract, he has not played well in any way, shape, or form.
No, he has not. And, the Blues, what's saving them right now? Their road record. Because if they played a lot of home games, this team would be buried. Think about this, Scott. The Blues are playing in the weakest division in hockey this year. I mean, who the clear-cut four are. Between Colorado, Vegas, Minnesota's really separated themselves from the pack. And the Blues, to a certain extent, they have a 5-point lead over the Los Angeles Kings at this point. So hopefully they can keep this lead. They're playing the Minnesota Wild and the Anaheim Ducks coming home this weekend. So hopefully they can get it together. But right now, it's scary, especially when you have a backup goaltender you don't really trust right now, Scott. You agree? You agree there?
Again, it's the same thing we've talked about all year. He's still trying to get a foothold on everything, and guys aren't totally confident. Although, again, when your main goalie's not playing very well either, I don't know that you can complain about your backup.
How many times have I told you before this season, Scott? I've told you and Wags the same thing. I didn't like this goaltending tandem going in.
So because what did you want him to do? I'm cutting you off, though, but what did you want him to do? Because you were the leader of the bandwagon to run Jake Allen out of town.
Well, I'm not. Look, I've seen what Jordan Bennington has done since that's happened. And, Wags could be right. That was when we were talking on the podcast on Monday. Maybe he needed that guy to push him. And the problem with the Blues is they never, at least since I've been around, have never had a clear-cut number one to where they can run with it without having somebody else pressure them. Now, a certain amount of pressure from a backup goaltender is a good thing. It makes both guys better. But Jake Allen was dubbed the number one goaltender. How'd that work out? Brian Elliott pushed him. Okay. Brian Elliott goes. Carter Hutton pushes him. Carter Hutton goes. Then Allen goes. Now what do you have? And Allen pushes Bennington. Allen's gone. So, I mean, yeah, we're putting a little too much on a young goalie in Ville Husso at this point, but it's just, it was going to be a transition for me. It was always going to be a transition for me in terms of the goaltending. And even you, Scott, you even say Bennington had to prove more. And even before this contract was signed, I don't really think he's proved enough to get that extension.
Wow. I mean, because we've gone back and forth on this. We've argued for 2 years. And, I said that about Jake Allen, that I thought it would be a mistake. And you argued with me and said they needed to get Bennington was the goalie and that Jake Allen needed to go. And so now you've totally flip-flopped from where you were a year ago because you thought Bennington was the greatest thing ever a year ago.
Well, did you see what Bennington did coming up? And I get it.
It goes back to my original point, though, Joe. You can't go by what you see in a couple of months and say, okay, this is the guy. And, and that's what I try to tell you about everything. You can't look at a small sample size and say, okay, that guy's great. You've got to let it play out for a whole season or a couple of seasons. You can't just look at a little section of a season or spring training or whatever and make a decision on a guy.
Yeah, it takes what, Scott? Like how long before you can really get a grasp on a guy? 3 years, 2 years?
At least a year, if not 2. Yeah, Jordan Bennington played out of his mind, during that playoff run. We all knew that he was never going to be that guy all the time. He just wasn't because he played out of his, like I said, he played out of his mind during that playoff run. But he's not been close to that since then.
Yeah, he has not been close to that since then. And you can't blame it all on Bennington either, Scott. I mean, the defense, yes, there's been injuries. And this defense, we talk about guys being soft. That whole defense is soft. They're backing into the zone. They're not being aggressive on guys with the puck. I mean, they're letting pucks by them left and right. And on top of that, Scott, your defense can't get out of their own zone. When you try to get a clear breakout, they haven't been able to do that. How many times has Wags said that? And I agree with him. The fact is, you need to get the puck out of your own zone. And they're not doing it.
I totally agree. But you got to look at this, too. You talk about this defense not being good. You've also lost your 2 best defensemen that you had last year, the last couple of years. Petrangelo's gone, and Parayko hasn't been there all year. So, and you kind of changed your identity. You went from those big physical defensemen to guys like Torrey Krug that are smaller and more offensive defensemen, counting on a guy like Colton Parayko to be there, to be that defensive anchor, and he's not there. And so you have these guys that are defensemen that defense really isn't their forte. They're more offensive defensemen, and your whole defense is now struggling.
What do you want to see going forward, Scott? I know we got to go to break here in a second, but what do you want to see going forward from this team?
Like I've said for the last month, you just got to try to hopefully tread water, and until you get everybody back and healthy, and hopefully get something going. But like Wags and I both agreed on the other night, unless the Blues get Colton Parayko back and get him back healthy, I don't think this team is going to get very much better than they are right now.
I would happen to agree. Now, hang with us through this break. After the break, we'll be talking some Major League Baseball. So stick with us right here on Crunch Time. Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. I'm Joe Hamilton alongside Scott Tobin. We just talked a lot of Blues hockey. They need to have a lot of work to do. Before we go any further, though, Lester chimes in. He says, the Blues aren't skating. Defensemen are not blocking any shots, and both goaltenders are bad. Receipt for losses. And, yeah, I happen to agree there. Now, Scott, we're getting to the nitty-gritty of spring training. We're getting to this point now where we should know what they could look like come Monday, or whenever these rosters have to be submitted in to the major league offices. What are some of the guys that in this Cardinals camp, that you really like what you've seen from?
You mean guys that are on the borderline of making the team? Is that what you're talking about, or just in general?
Border guys are making a team. Well, both. Go ahead, both.
I mean, if you're talking about guys that are on the border of making the team, the first guy that's got to come out of your mouth is John Nagowski. I mean, what else can the guy do at this point to try to make this team? He's looked really good. Rendon has looked pretty good, and the opportunities that he's gotten to possibly be an infielder, bench player on this team. Andrew Kisner has won that backup catcher's job. He's done a good job when he's got a chance to play defense and bat. So that's a good sign for the Cardinals. And then, your outfield, for the most part, has done a pretty decent job. When you look at what Tyler O'Neill's done, Lane Thomas has done, Dylan Carlson's starting to come on. He's hit a couple of home runs, starting to heat up a little bit. The guy that worries you a little bit is Harrison Bader, although I'm not all that super concerned because, he missed some time with that elbow. And, they're gonna play the hot guy in the outfield. If Bader's struggling a little bit, you're gonna see Lane Thomas play as long as Thomas is hitting a little bit. They're gonna mix and match that outfield, at least at the start of the season with those four guys. So, I feel pretty good about where we're at with the outfield. And then, I'd like to say John Nagowski is going to make the team, but I don't think he will. I think Matt Carpenter is going to have that job, even though he's 1 for 29. I think that $18 million, he's going to be on this team, whether people want to hear that or not. And they're going to give it some time. Like some people were talking on another station today, I think you probably look middle of June maybe, and if Matt Carpenter's hitting 100, hitting somewhere around there and just really struggling, then maybe the Cardinals look to release him, because at that point it won't be as much money because the contract gets prorated as you go through the season. So it won't be the $18 million anymore. It'll be down to, at that point, it'll be down to like $12 million. So maybe in June, if he's really struggling, maybe the Cardinals release him. It still totally wouldn't shock me if he struggles a whole lot. And Wags and I talked about this the other night too. If Matt Carpenter struggles for the next 5 or 6 days and doesn't get another hit, it wouldn't totally shock me if the Cardinals put him on the disabled list with a phantom injury. All of a sudden his back tightens up or he pulls something and you keep him at extended spring training, or you send him to the satellite camp for 2 or 3 weeks to see if he can get something going there. And that gives you wiggle room that you can put in Nagowski or somebody like that on the roster and then see where you're at that point. So that's another way they could go.
That's another way they could go with Carpenter, but I was talking to Wags on a podcast, and basically he was talking about the guys getting hotter, and we talked about Carlson, we talked about DeYoung, and then he's like, Carpenter's doing absolutely nothing, and that's not what the Cardinals want to see. Nice to see Tommy Edman has that spot locked up at second base. And going to the outfield, a guy that's really shocked me with how he started it last year, but he didn't really finish the job when it came to altering his swing. That guy's Tyler O'Neill. Guy's hitting 412 after today in spring training. I mean, that's got to give you some confidence, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good sign. It's definitely what you were hoping to see. Again, don't get too excited about what we see in spring training, because a week from now, 10 days from now, it's a whole new ball game.
I get it.
But yeah, but it's definitely a positive sign. You like some of the things you're seeing. He's driving the ball to the opposite field, which is a nice thing to see. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I'm pretty happy with everything I've seen from the lineup. And for 90% of it, the pitching staff has looked really good. All the guys in the bullpen have been really, really good. Alex Reyes has been amazing. Jordan Hicks looks good. Those guys look good. You got a little bit of an issue with your starting rotation. You hope that Carlos settles in. He's had a couple of really good starts in spring. He's had a couple of not so good starts in spring. Although, again, that last start that he had, and that was on Friday, and Wags and I talked about it. I don't know if you saw that interview, Joe. Carlos gave up 5 runs in the first inning, but then he pitched 3 innings after that and didn't give up a hit. And they interviewed him afterwards, and he said that basically in that first inning, he was just kind of experimenting with some stuff. He was working on his windup, he was working on his release point, and was trying some things that had worked for him a couple of years ago, just trying to see what felt good. He was throwing some different pitches that he hadn't thrown in a while. And so that's why I always say, don't look too deep into spring training, because that's what a lot of guys do in spring training. They're trying to get in shape, but they're also trying to play around with a different pitch or a different arm angle or this or that, just to see if something works while they're warming up. So while we love to get upset and worked up about what somebody's doing in spring training, a lot of times they're just experimenting with stuff. They're trying to get loose and they're trying to see what feels good. So that's why I always don't get too high or too low on what I see in spring.
Yeah, it's good not to get too high or too low, but when guys are getting hot, like we said, Dylan Carlson getting hot. I know he had a little ruffle early in spring training, and then you see Paul DeYoung getting hot, and that's those are the guys that you need for this team to be successful. Another guy that could be one of those French players, Scott, that you talked about earlier. What about a guy like Austin Dean? Where does he fit? He hit a home run today. And he hasn't, even Todd Hollingsworth with the Marlins broadcast said the other day when they did a joint broadcast that Austin Dean has not gotten a true shot. Do you think the Cardinals give him a shot to do something this year?
I think he's going to be a guy that goes to satellite camp, and if somebody gets hurt, then he comes up. But, there's just really not an open path for him on this team to really get a shot. Dylan Carlson's going to play right. Tyler O'Neill's going to play left, and Lane Thomas and Harrison Bader are going to be the center field, are going to be that third and fourth outfielders. So, fifth outfielder is kind of where he's at. And then, he plays a little bit of first base and he plays a little bit of third base. Well, you've got kind of the same problem that Nagowski's got. You've got 2 future Hall of Famers at those 2 positions and Matt Carpenter ahead of you. So there's really no open spot for Austin Dean to make this ball club.
You think Austin Dean finds an opportunity elsewhere at this point, or do you think he sticks with the organization?
I think he'll be here this year. Again, like I said, I think he's an insurance policy, which is kind of what the Cardinals said when they traded for him last year. He was that guy in case they have an issue or somebody gets hurt, that he's there, that they can bring him up. He's got some major league experience. And if there was a DH in the National League, then maybe there would be an opportunity for him to get some at-bats. But, right now, the way this ball club is set up, I just don't see it because, again, even in the outfield, I said, fifth outfielder is kind of where he fits, but then you're also fighting with Justin Williams there too. So, I don't see a clear path for Austin Dean to get a whole lot of playing time with this ball club.
It'll be interesting, man. 2 more games. And then is this for a quarantine reason, Scott? I guess they have basically almost a week off after Saturday. They play Thursday, obviously, but they play Saturday and then they're off till Thursday. Is that for quarantine reasons?
Well, normally it's kind of like that anyway, because normally you would go play against your minor league team. But, it sounded like from what I heard today, they're going to play some inter-squad games on Sunday. Then they'll probably fly to Cincinnati on Monday, have workouts Tuesday and Wednesday, and then start the season on Thursday. So, it's just a couple extra days to make sure everybody's ready and rested. And but they'll be playing some inter-squad games, doing that kind of stuff those couple of days.
I'd love to actually, even though we've seen a full spring training, I'd love to see those inter-squad games just to see how hard these guys go at each other. That's interesting to me. I remember watching those last year before the shortened season. That was fun to watch.
Yeah, it's like a practice. It's like a scrimmage, with it, like everything else, But it's a good opportunity for them to get some work in.
Yeah, it is. That is for sure. So, Scott, I remember a while back briefly telling you that there were going to be some rule changes, at least in the minor leagues. I guess they're testing these out. So I'm just going to read these off to you, and then and then I'll get your instant reaction to it. Okay, I'm starting in AAA. So slightly larger bases with a less slippery surface. Okay. A requirement, and this is AA now. A requirement that all fielders have to have their cleats within the outer boundary of the infield dirt. A requirement that pitchers must step off the rubber to attempt a pickoff. That's high A. Limited to 2 pickoff attempts per plate appearances. That's low A. And then, it goes on from there. But, Scott, from what I read to you, what interests you in this?
I don't like any of it, to be totally honest with you.
Okay, can you go one by one and tell me why?
Sure. I don't understand the whole bigger base thing. That makes zero sense. I mean, why do we need bigger bases after 100 and something years? Why do you decide, hey, we need bigger bases now, less slippery bases? Really? I mean, that sounds like they're trying to change something just to say they changed something. I don't understand that one. The having to have your plates on the back of the infield grass or infield dirt, that doesn't make any sense either, because what if you're wanting to play in? What if you have a forced play at the plate? You're going to tell players you can't play in now because you have to have your cleats on the back of the infield dirt? I mean, that takes away strategy. That makes absolutely no sense. It takes away part of the game. And then the stepping off thing, they're doing that to try to speed up the pace of play. Again, I don't really think those things make that much of a difference. What are your thoughts?
I don't like messing with baseball, period. I just figure leave the game alone. It's been the same way for 100 and some odd years. You leave the game alone because it's gained popularity the way it was. You try to screw with baseball, you're gonna lose fans. And Lester Branham, he basically paints the right picture here. They're truly ruining the baseball game. I mean, it's sad. It truly is sad in my mind. Look, leave the game alone, right, Scott? I mean, you and me both are baseball purists.
Again, a lot of these rules have to be approved by the players, and the players have already said a bunch of this stuff is stupid. They don't see any reason to do it. I don't know why Rob Manfred thinks he needs to keep trying to change things. The stuff he's trying to change makes no sense. It's just stupid. It's trying to change things just to say you changed something, and it doesn't improve the game. It doesn't make the game more enjoyable. He actually seems to keep trying to take strategy out of the game for some reason, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I think, I've heard people say this. I'm not sure Rob Manfred likes the game of baseball. That's what it
Why
seems
would
like.
you be appointed commissioner, though? That's the thing. That's what I don't get.
Because he's a yes man for the owners, But again, you have to have agreement from the players to get these rules changed. And if they don't agree to it, it's not going to change anyway. And so I don't think we see a lot of these things implemented in Major League Baseball. But if he keeps wanting to experiment in the minor leagues and the minor leagues go along with it, then more power to him, I guess.
Yeah, more power to him. But we're going to go to break. We come back. We'll be talking some NFL and football in general. I mean, the draft's changing. We'll talk where the draft's going to be normal. I'll tell you about that right after this.
Hey Crunch Time fans, my name is Graham Forsyth. I'm the host of Coffee with Graham and the Prospect Show on ASTV Productions. On Coffee with Graham, I talk to athletes, coaches, and whoever else involved in the amateur sports scene in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And on the Prospect Show, I talk to the best young hockey prospects from around North America. You can catch all the coverage on ASTV Productions. You can catch Coffee with Graham on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. And for the Prospect Show, that show airs every Friday at 8 p.m. Central Time. Hope to see you there. Have a good one.
Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. I'm Joe Hamilton along with Scott Tobin. Scott, it's been known that the draft is gonna be normal this year. How psyched are you for that?
That's good. It's good. They're gonna. going to be back in the draft rooms. It's going to be a little bit more like normal. There may actually be some fans. It'll be fun, man. And last year wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. Doing it virtually, it actually ended up coming off pretty well. But it will be nice seeing it closer to normal this year.
It will be nice. And you know, all of the big draft picks will go to Philadelphia, or not Philadelphia, Cleveland, to be drafted, but there will be some draft picks that will not be there and will be drafted virtually. But, you know, it'll be nice to hear a non-generated boo for Roger Goodell. I'm actually psyched for that part alone.
Yeah, and you know there will be a nice big boo for him as always. But yeah, I'm looking. It's hard to believe it's almost draft time. It seems like we just had the Super Bowl, and here we are headed into April and draft, and before we know it, we'll be talking about mini camps and training camp and the start of the season. It comes really quick.
Yeah, hopefully by the time we get to said season that we're at 100%, because that would be an awesome thing. You know, I was talking to Theo about it last night, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Scott. If a commissioner's booed, whether it be Rob Manfred, whether it be Roger Goodell, whether it be Gary Bettman, if they're booed, does that mean they've done something right in your mind, or they're just actually hated?
They've probably done something right, and you know, no matter what they do, there's going to be some percentage of fans that boo them for every decision that they make. You know how fans are. You're not going to make everybody happy, no matter what you do.
You're never going to make any fans happy. All fans happy, that's for sure. Scott, go ahead and tell us what we've seen. I will start you off with this. And the Philadelphia Eagles have a backup quarterback in Joe Flacco. He signed a 1-year deal. Your thoughts on that signing? Does he fit the system there? Even though he's going to be a backup, chances are if Jalen Hurts gets hurt, he's in. So does he fit the system? Do you like this signing at all, or are you thinking to yourself, what the hell are they doing?
I mean, I don't know how much Joe Flacco's got left. You know, it's been a while since he's been really good, but he's going back. He's from Maryland, so being in Philadelphia, he's close to home again. And you know, he can still be a decent backup, I think. You know, again, I think he's way past his starter days. But yeah, he can fill in if something happens and they need an emergency starter for a couple of weeks. You know, we've talked about Jalen Hurts. It'll be interesting to see what Philadelphia really thinks of him, whether he is the starter going into next year or if they decide to go into the draft and bring in another quarterback, which wouldn't shock me at all. I don't think they'll go first round, but I wouldn't be surprised if second or third round they draft a quarterback, you know, to at least with him.
My feeling is, Scott, the fact is you drafted Jalen Hurts to be an impact on your team. Now, when he did play last year, he did play well. You know, not the whole time. I know that, Scott, but he showed flashes of brilliance. And if Philadelphia's really wanting to do a rebuild, which it sounds like they're doing, why not give him a chance? Why not see if you have something there?
Well, again, you know, they've seen him. You know, they saw him for a year. They saw him in training camp. They saw him in practice. They saw him. You know, they have an idea of what they've got there. And I think, like I said, I think if they draft a quarterback, it's going to be a second or third round guy. Jalen Hurts is going to get a shot. But, you know, I'm not sure that they're 100% sold on him being their starter, you know, and leading that franchise. So that's my big question is I just don't know what Philadelphia really thinks of Jalen Hurts, because you got to remember he did get pulled at the end of the season because he was not playing well.
Yeah, you got a good point there, Scott. And, you know, as a rebuilding team goes along, which they are, it's really going to hinge on what he does this year, Scott. Is this a make or break year for Jalen Hurts?
It could be. It could be. Again, you know, it just comes down to what kind of an offense Philadelphia wants to run, you know, how they want to set up that offense, and if they like what they've seen from him or not. You know, if they give him that opportunity, if they really believe in him, then maybe he's got a couple of years. If they have a lot of questions, then yeah, this may be his one shot to really prove that he can be the starter there.
Yeah, this may be truly his one shot, and hopefully it's not, because What I've seen from Jalen Hurts, the good side of him, it's really good. So I hope he can find that consistency. This Desean Watson thing is brewing day by day by day. I think now up to 14 accusers. Scott, what's going to happen here? Is he going to end up getting released from his contract?
Did you hear the latest news? Deshaun's lawyer came out and said they have absolute proof that at least one of those accusations is completely false. They're going to release that evidence in the next couple of days to prove that's false. And they believe once they prove that one of those allegations is false, they can also start to prove that some of those other ones are false. So this is far from over. Like we said the other day, there's just way too much we don't know about this. But if we start to prove that one or two of these girls made these accusations up, then it puts into question all of the allegations and whether this really is just money hungry and is trying to dredge people up. Here's an interesting fact, and I'm not going to go into conspiracy theory mode, but you brought this up, and we kind of talked about this last week. You said, well, what if Houston's trying to tarnish his image? The lawyer that represents all of these women lives in the same subdivision as the Houston Texans owner. They're not next door neighbors, but they're like 2 houses down, which again, I'm not saying means anything, but that's just kind of interesting that they live in the same subdivision and they're known to be friendly. So that's kind of an interesting little side bit to this whole story. Maybe things are so bad in Houston that Houston decided that, I'm not going to start the conspiracy thing, but it just puts another question in your mind. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Again, not trying to say that he did do it or didn't do it because we don't know. We just got to let it play out. But there's a whole lot of stuff here to let play out, see what happens in the coming weeks.
Well, Scott, I say that because the fact is, it wouldn't shock me from Houston if they did do it. If they are doing this, I really wouldn't be shocked at this point if I'm right there. But at the same time, I was kind of throwing a shot in the dark there because I know how bad the Houston organization is, and you kind of dismiss that. But now you're not totally thinking what I'm thinking, but you're starting to get there, aren't you?
I mean, I'm not going to go down. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole because I don't want to dismiss any of this because it is serious charges, and we need to just see how it plays out. So I'm trying to be careful what I say and what I put out there. But it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of Deshaun's camp. If they can prove that some of these allegations are false, then it will be really interesting where this all goes.
It will be, that's for sure. Scott, what are some of the other moves, other rumors that you've been seeing around the league?
There's just a lot of things going on right now. Probably the biggest rumor that keeps coming up, and Adam Schefter's brought this up a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, is that he does not think that the Russell Wilson to the Bears deal is completely dead. He's brought up the possibility of maybe it being a three-team trade with the Jets, where Sam Darnold goes to Seattle and the Jets get some draft picks and the Bears get Russell Wilson. That's just kind of his thought. And for somebody like Adam Schefter to keep saying that, you kind of think maybe there's some smoke there. He said that draft day is kind of the D-Day for this. I mean, it doesn't happen by the draft. It won't happen. But he thinks there's still a possibility that Russell Wilson ends up in Chicago. So that'll be interesting to watch, and it'll make some Bears fans still happy, all those people that wanted to jump off a bridge when they signed Andy Dalton last week. And to add a little bit more legitimacy to that, apparently the Bears are getting close to trading Nick Foles. So there would go their backup quarterback if they trade Foles. So that would make you think, too, that they're going to bring in another quarterback from somewhere. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. And then the other thing, while we talked about all the allegations against Deshaun, the other thing is going to be, besides his criminal litigation and the civil litigation, the NFL is going to have to investigate this as well. And so that brings into fact, if the NFL just investigates to see if there's anything inappropriate going on, whether it turns out to be criminal or civil or not, that could hamper whether Desean plays a whole season or not. He may have to sit out a couple of weeks while they look into this if their investigation's not over. So that could put some questions into whether Desean ends up getting traded or what Houston does with him or how that plays out. So there's a whole lot to this Desean Watson thing that's going to come out in the next 2 or 3 weeks that's going to be really interesting for NFL fans to watch.
It will be truly interesting. The one thing, Scott, is you never want to assume things are going to happen in the NFL, because once you do, it seems like the opposite happens. So we'll have to see, man. But I don't like what I've seen so far, at least with the allegations and everything else. The NFL has had numerous occasions where it's looked bad, and hopefully, Scott, they end up pulling out of this looking good. I mean, you had I forget what his name was. Played for Baltimore. He was a receiver. Remember that?
Running back. Ray Rice.
Yeah, Ray Rice. They had the Ray Rice situation. I don't want this to end up like the Ray Rice situation, where they completely botched that.
Well, and that was different because, there was video evidence and they tried to cover it up. The thing about this Desean thing, again, we keep going back to it. The biggest thing, and the reason that people have so many questions, is that from all accounts, this is totally against the person that everybody knows Desean Watson to be. Again, not saying it's not possible that he did this, not trying to dismiss that, but from everything we know and everything that people around the league know about Desean Watson, this is just completely out of character for him. And, his college coach at Clemson, Debo, came out and said, he totally 100% backs Desean, doesn't believe that there's any truth to this, said that the Desean that he knew would never do anything like this. So, for your poor head coach to come out that strongly in support of him as well, it's going to be really interesting.
And that will be very, very interesting. Another signing before we go to break here. The Broncos have a deal to bring back Kareem Jackson. Are you shocked about this, or did the Broncos get their guy like they had to keep him?
They didn't have to keep him, but he'll help. He helped solidify that defense. So not a bad move for the Broncos.
That is not a bad move at all. And I think, the Broncos are rebuilding, I guess. But, Scott, how long do you think before the Broncos, if they do things right, how long can they be back to a good team again?
It depends on what happens with their quarterback. And there's been a lot of talk that the Broncos have been looking around, that they're not 100% sold on Drew Lock. So, that'll be an interesting situation to watch as well, because there had been some talk that Denver was interested in Desean Watson before all this came up. So, again, depending on whether Drew Lock can really step up and really fulfill all of his potential and play better next year, or if they go get a different quarterback, they've got some weapons there, absolutely, around him to make this team at least solid, you would think. They brought Von Miller back on defense. But that's a tough division. You got to look what you're playing at in that AFC West. You've got Kansas City. You've got a Raiders team that's getting better. You've got a Charger team that's getting better. So, it's a super competitive division. So, it's just going to be hard to say exactly how long it takes Denver to get back.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, let's go to break. When we come back, we're going to be talking some Mizzou hoops, maybe dive deep into what we could see this weekend in the Sweet 16. But check us out for that right after this on Crunch Time.
Hi, I'm JD Houghton, host of the Stats Sports Show. Catch it every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time for all things Saskatchewan sports.
Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Oh man, I don't know what to think of this Mizzou team going forward now. After hearing the news of what we heard today with Xavier Pinson going on that transfer pool, going into that transfer pool, I don't know what we think. And I've heard rumors in the background that the relationship between him and Conso Martin weren't so great. Didn't really play much in the second half of that game, or at least the second half of that game. Scott, what do you make of this?
Xavier Pinson trying to move on somewhere to play one more year before he tries to catch up in a professional league, whether it be in Europe or something. It was doubtful that he was going to come back. He would have been a fifth-year senior. So he's going to go as that fifth-year senior transfer that allows him to move on and play somewhere else one more year. Kind of like Bugs did with Mizzou this year after he transferred from Hawaii to Mizzou to play this season. Xavier Pinson, like you said, there have been some rumors that him and Conzo hadn't exactly seen eye to eye the last few weeks. But you look at Xavier Pinson's play. I mean, the first half of the season, he was really, really good. And Mizzou was really, really good. And then all of a sudden, he just stopped playing well. His shooting percentage went way down. He was turning the ball over. He was like a different player the second half of the season. He was a little bit banged up, whether that was it, whether him and Conzo were having disagreements. We don't really know. But like Wags and I talked about, this is going to be a whole new Mizzou team next year because all 5 starters are gone. You're going to be a young team next year. I don't expect a lot from Mizzou next year. You're probably going to be a 7 or 8 win team, more than likely. I mean, I know that sounds bad, but possibly 10. I don't see them winning much more than that because they're going to be young and inexperienced. And so, what happens with Conzo, what happens with this program over the next couple of years will be really interesting to see how it all plays out.
There is that transfer pool, Scott, and I'm wondering if Mizzou dips their toes into this, and if Conzo wants to keep his job at least after 2 years from now, he better do some recruiting and have that transfer pool ready. And there is a rumor out there, a little rumor, I don't know if it's true or not, but Caleb Love, maybe pry him away from Chapel Hill.
I don't see him leaving North Carolina to come to Mizzou. He had a solid year last year. I don't see that happening. I mean, I guess it could potentially if he's just completely unhappy at North Carolina, but I wouldn't expect that to happen.
I wouldn't expect that to happen either, but Conzo Martin has a 10 game over. His record is 10 games over 500 since he's been here, but I don't know. I mean, I was talking to Wags about this when we were doing the podcast, and he said you and Wags were both high on this team going in, and they had a 13-3 start, but then you're 3-7 at the end of the season, and then you go into these tournaments, and you don't do so well in the SEC tournament to begin with, and then you get knocked out by Oklahoma in the first round. What does this tell you about Conzo? Is he that much of a good? Is he as good of a coach as we thought he could be?
You have to put some questions on Conzo, definitely. Wags and I talked about that the other night. Mizzou didn't run much of an offense, those last 5 or 6 regular season games and then into the tournament. When they were playing really well, they were using Jeremiah Tillman. They were getting the ball low, and he was a beast. They kind of went away from that. All of a sudden, and they weren't a good three-pointing shooting team, but all of a sudden they were firing three-pointers up like there was nothing else they could do. I mean, you look at this game, they lost against Oklahoma. They shot 27 three-pointers in that game, and they did like 9 of them. I don't know. Again, we talked about it. It was like they just didn't run an offense. It was dribble, dribble, shoot a three, dribble, dribble, shoot a three, maybe pass once. They didn't go down low to Tillman at all and didn't really run an offense. So, and some of that has to fall on Conzo because, that's the head coach's job is to come up with an offensive game plan and to have your team prepared. And it just didn't seem like offensively they had much of a plan that last month or so of the season.
Yeah, he didn't have much of a plan. It seemed uninspired basketball. And Wags made a point the other day. He said, when you're not like transitioning the ball around, when you're not like when you don't have anybody to rebound, you have one Mizzou sweater or Mizzou jersey in front. and like let's say 5 Oklahoma jerseys around him, you're not going to get very many rebounds. And rebounding is a big part of this game, Scott. And it didn't seem like they rebounded enough. It didn't seem like they did anything. And, you know, they got their butts kicked, let's be honest, against an Oklahoma team that I thought maybe they had a chance against. I'm not saying Oklahoma's bad. I just thought it would have been a better matchup. You know what I'm saying?
They didn't get their butt kicked. They lost by 4. So they were right there.
Yeah, but the thing is, Scott, when I say it like that, I mean, when you're not producing anything, Scott, down the floor, you got your butt kicked. You got outplayed. They got outcoached in that second half. That's why they lost that game. Early in that game, Scott, I thought maybe Mizzou was going to win this game because they were doing what they needed to do. In that second half, it seemed like a reverse of adjustments. They adjusted to play bad rather than playing good. Like, do you get where I'm going with that?
They had 3 different spurts of over 4 minutes where they didn't make a basket. When you shoot from that poorly. So for 12 in a 40-minute game, they had 12 minutes where they didn't make a basket in that game. You can't do that and win. When shots aren't falling, you're not going to win. And that's what happened the other night. And it happened too many times. Again, when you have a bad 3-point shooting team firing up 27 threes, it makes for a tough night. And again, going back to your rebounding point, when you're playing perimeter basketball and you have one guy underneath the basket and the other 4 guys are all around the 3-point range, 3-point line, that makes it really hard to have anybody in there to rebound. So like you said, you're basically in there to rebound with 4 red jerseys around you because everybody else is out on the perimeter just standing around watching the shot go off.
Scott, I would have loved to have been a fly in the wall to watch you watch this game. I know that sounds weird, but I know how you get about your Mizzou basketball. I could see you screaming at the TV. Were you?
I wasn't, just because I pretty much expected it. I could see it coming. As much as I wanted them to win that game, having watched them play the last month, it was pretty much the same thing I had seen then. They just weren't playing good fundamental basketball, and I really wasn't all that invested watching that game. I was frustrated, but not like I would be sometimes. It was just I was just kind of numb watching it, going, "Oh well, there's Mizzou in a tournament game." But that goes back to the fact that they haven't won a tournament game in almost 10 years now.
That's sad. That is sad. Hopefully they can build this program back to prominence because I think it's going to take a little longer than once thought. Let's move across the river now, and that's Illinois. I can't say it was shocking, Scott, because I remember talking to you on this show about this Loyola Chicago-Illinois matchup and how this could be hell for Illinois. And sure enough, it was. This Loyola Chicago team, for whatever reason, plays well in the last 2 years, and it's been on the back of a 100-year-old, or I think, is it 102? Is it 102?
102. Sister Jean.
Soon to be 102, Sister Jean. It seems like shit. Her soul's in all of them, and they just win. Not that they won the tournament last year, but they were a good story, and they will continue to be a good story this year. So, Scott, just before we get to that team going to the Sweet 16, what'd you think of Illinois', what they did? Like, what were you as annoyed with Illinois as I was?
They didn't play well. That was the worst game all year. Part of it was Loyola's game plan. They played really good defense, and part of it was Illinois just did not play well. They turned the ball over. They didn't make good passes. They made bad decisions on the offensive end. They didn't play good defense. And you got to give Loyola a lot of credit. You got to give their coach Porter Mosier good credit too. They've done this a couple of times now in the tournament, and we talked about it. Going into this, that this might be Illinois' toughest test until they got to the Sweet 16, and they got a bad draw. Loyola shouldn't have been seeded that low. They should have been probably a 4 or 5 seed, not an 8 seed. They were that. And Illinois ran into it, and Illinois' two big studs had bad games, both of them, and it's the worst possible time.
So, Scott, my one question to you, I had this question posed to Wags before on Monday during the podcast. Is the seeding system, you saw it in the group chat too, is the seeding system in this tournament flawed?
No, it's not flawed. It's not flawed. I mean, it's definitely set up for the big schools to have the better seeds and small schools to have bad seeds. Illinois, by all accounts, Illinois should have been a number one. You know, there's no doubt about that from what they did during the regular season. You know, this was a weird year. So we talked about it. Everybody talked about how powerful the Big Ten was, and they looked amazing during the regular season. You know, you had Michigan, you had Illinois, you had Ohio State, you had Iowa, and they were beating each other up. But they all had really good years. You know, and everybody thought that was the conference. You know, people were saying it was the best conference we've seen in decades. And then they all get knocked out. I mean, the only one left standing is Michigan. And then you look at a Pac-12 conference that nobody was talking about. You know, they weren't supposed to do anything. And they're undefeated in the tournament. You know, you've got Oregon State, you've got UCLA, you've got USC, you've got Oregon. You know, you've got all these teams that nobody was talking about at all. And they've all pulled off huge upsets. And, I mean, I don't know if you saw it last night, but USC just absolutely destroyed Kansas. You know,
yeah, and I was echoing Wags that whole time. He goes, I can't say I'm not mad that Kansas is getting their butt kicked. I'm sure you're the same way, Scott.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm always happy when Kansas loses. But I mean, that was just utter domination from the tip, pretty much. And you know, so it's a weird year because teams didn't play. You know, everybody played in conference for the most part, and you didn't play a whole lot of teams out of your conference after those first couple of weeks of the season. And so it was just a weird year to really get a grasp on how good different conferences were against other teams. But you know, I don't have a problem with the way it was seeded. Like I said, you know, I mean, and you look at it, what you've got in the Sweet 16, you still have 3 number ones. You've got a number 2. You've got a 3. You've got a 4. So it's not like all of the top seeds got knocked out. You know, it's just, you know, we saw more upsets than normal this year, for sure. But you know, that's what makes the first 2 rounds of this tournament so great, is that you're going to see those things happen. You know, you're going to have the Oral Roberts every once in a while just absolutely come out of nowhere and beat a team like Ohio State. You're going to have a North Texas show up and beat somebody, and that's what makes March Madness so much fun.
Yeah, that really is what makes it fun. And someone brought up this point. I forgot who it was. What if every year was like this year in terms of only conference scheduling? Then it would truly be March Madness every year, right?
Yeah, you don't want that, though. You want to get those teams. You want to see teams play each other that you don't normally get to see. You know, you want to see the Mizzous. You want to see Mizzou play a UCLA every once in a while during the regular season. You want to see a SLU in a North Carolina or a SLU in Kentucky. You know, you want to see those interconference, out-of-conference matchups. You know, it just makes the regular season more exciting that way.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I just found that point to be so interesting. Scott, you have anything before we run out of time tonight?
Not a whole lot. Good show tonight. Just going to remind everybody that next week we will be doing our baseball preview. We're going to do that for the podcast on Monday, the radio show, and we'll probably be I'm not sure how we're going to do the nightly show. Maybe we'll break down different divisions each night or something like that, just to kind of spread it out through the week. But be watching, because we will definitely be diving deep into baseball next week.
Oh, that will be fun to watch for you guys, that's for sure. Well, great show tonight. Thank you guys for watching at home. For Scott Tobin, I'm Joe Hamilton. Be good to one another and do the right things. See you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.